39 challenge round against the United States commenced the day Great Britain and Australia declared war on Germany. This made us very apprehensive and very tense, and we couldn't have made a worse start. Bobby Riggs beat John Bromwich in the first rubber and straight sets, and in the second match, although I thought I could beat Frankie Parker, he was so consistent and his backhand passing shots were so good, and we struggled for many hours, but he finally beat me 7-5 in the fifth set. So we were 2 matches down. In the vital doubles match, the United States decided to play Jack Kramer and Joe Hunt. John and I had managed to win the United States doubles championships a few weeks prior to the match. So the Americans decided they would try out these 2 young players who hit the ball very hard. As a matter of fact, at that time, I think Joe Hunt had an edge on Kramer. Actually, they won the first set, but then we managed to get on top of them and won the game and match in 4 sets. The fourth match on the last day, I came out against Bobby Riggs, and I must say felt very tight, but managed to win the first 2 sets rather comfortably. But Riggs is a great fighter and a very difficult man to play against, and he won the next 2 sets. In the final set, I managed to lead 5-2 with a match ball. At this stage, Bobby came to net. I could have passed him, but lobbed the ball instead, and he won the next 2 games. But I finally served the match out at 6 games to 4. Then came the deciding and vital rubber. Frankie Parker didn't expect to play. I think he felt certain that Riggs would win, and so he came out rather cold. Bromwich, on the other hand, had been practicing on an outside court with Fred Perry. He was eager, he had the doubles victory under his belt, so he felt really hot and wanting to go. The first rally went to 20 or 30 shots, and it wouldn't have mattered what Parker could have done. Bromwich was absolutely superb and determined to keep the ball in play. He simply never made a mistake, and finally Frankie Parker's game simply collapsed. So for the first time in our tennis history, we had won the Davis Cup.
Happy to be back home, and even happier to bring back the Davis Cup to the greatest tennis-loving land in the world. It's been a wonderfully happy trip. Everybody has done their part in winning this cup, and I'm sure that the people back in Australia will be very pleased to see this famous trophy.
Well, the war had broken out, and all those players we played against, such as Henna Henkel, we heard that poor Henna had been killed on the Russian front. And then later we also heard that Joe Hunt, who played against us in the 39 Davis Cup team, was killed in a plane crash. And Jerry Yamagishi, the great Japanese, joined the Japanese army, just as John Bromwich and I did. We joined the army in our own country. In 1946, after the war, the Americans came out to Australia to challenge for the Davis Cup.
Walter Pate, it gives me very great pleasure to welcome you to this country and your wonderful team, and I would be glad if you'd introduce them to our people.
It's a great pleasure, I'm sure, to be here in Australia. I've been looking forward since 1939, since we've lost the Cup, to return to Australia and meet the Australian people, and especially the Davis Cup team, Bromwich and Quist, old friends, and Harry Hopman.
Jack Kramer was the best player in the world. He was a superb striker of the ball. Great serve, wonderful backhand, and a good forehand, which he came slightly under as he moved to net. He completely dominated the 1946 challenge round, which the Americans won very comfortably. Kramer also beat another American, Tom Brown, in the 1947 Wimbledon final. He also won the United States Championships in 1946 and 47. Then he turned professional and soon became involved in promoting professional tours. In 1949, he signed on against the then United States champion, Pancho Gonzalez.
Jack Kramer was a remarkable fella. In my opinion, he did more for tennis than almost any other player. Of course, the Australian Association thought he was an ogre because he came out here and stole all our best amateurs so they could join the professional ranks. That's a lot of nonsense because the majority of the fellas playing tennis during that period, they were sham amateurs anyway. And all Kramer wanted to do was to give them an opportunity to earn money from the game. If they had remained in the so-called amateur game of that period, they wouldn't have earned anything at all. And so I think Kramer did a lot, not only for the game, but for the players of that period. Far from being an ogre, I think the majority of the professional players today can get down and thank Jack Kramer for having started the ball rolling in a very big way.
With Kramer and Gonzalez in the professional ranks, that was the start of the golden age of Australian tennis, and its first great player was Frank Sedgman. Like many other players, Sedgman played his best tennis in the Davis Cup. Here's an example against Ted Schroeder. Sedgman was expected to win Wimbledon in 1950 and 51, but was defeated on both occasions. He had his victory there in 1952, defeating Jaroslav Drobny. Czechoslovakian by birth, Drobny was a very good player, with a powerful serve and an excellent forehand, and he won the first set from Sedgman. But Drobny had a weakness on the backhand on grass courts, which I think was the difference between them. Sedgman took the match in 4 sets. Sedgman won the Australian singles in 1950 and 51, and he won the United States title in 1951 and 52. And Maureen Connolly also won the United States singles in 51 and again in 1952 when she beat Doris Hart in the final. Maureen Connolly had probably the best ground strokes of any woman tennis player. She really cracked the ball from both backhand and forehand. She came to net only on occasion. She didn't have to, because her opponents who did come in risked being passed by those superb ground strokes. Little Mo, as she was called, went on to become the first woman to win the Grand Slam in 1953. The doubles combination of Frank Sedgman and Ken McGregor was one of the greatest teams of all time. Here they are playing against the #1 American team of Tony Trabert and Vic Seixas. Trabert serving. McGregor to serve. Sedgman and McGregor defeated Mervyn Rose and Don Candy at Forest Hills in 1951 to become the first pair to win the doubles Grand Slam. They too turned professional, joining Jack Kramer's troupe in 1953.
I'd just like to express my thanks to the Australian public for the way they have received our announcement that we're going to turn professionals. They've treated us well in our amateur tennis career, and we have regrets that we are leaving the amateur field because of the way we have been treated in the past. But I'm sure we'll be able to help in some ways when we come back. We'll be able to help prepare the Davis Cup team, and I'm sure that Ken and I will do everything in our power for Australia to keep the Davis Cup in the future.
I was the general manager of the Dunlop Sports Goods Group when I first heard of Lou Hode. The president of the Balmain Association called me and said, "Look, Adrian, there's a young boy in one of the clubs. I think he's a remarkable kid. Can I bring him round to see you?" I was very impressed, and later on we were able to give Lou Hode his first job. Ken Rosewell. Look at the way he watches the ball. Lou Hode and Ken Rosewell were outstanding juniors, and right from the very start, they formed one of the most exciting combinations in the history of tennis. Lou Hode was one of the game's completely natural players. He was fast, he was very strong, and he simply hit the ball instinctively from any position on the court. And he hit it hard, and he certainly hit it well. Ken Rosewell was a different type of player. Early in his career, he played mainly from the back court. He was very consistent, and his backhand was certainly one of the great shots of tennis. Harry Hopman was involved in winning the Davis Cup 16 times altogether. His great forte was physical fitness and having those players of his at the best for the big events. They needed to be because they were put to the test very early in the '53 Davis Cup. Hode had won the first singles against Seixas, but then Tony Trabert had defeated Ken Rosewell. Seixas and Trabert then won the doubles, so Hode came out to play Trabert, with Australia 1-2 down. Lou won the first 2 sets, but then Trabert, playing brilliantly, won the next 2. This was certainly one of the great Davis Cup matches that I've ever seen, and the 5th set was one of the toughest. And I think that Hode proved that day how good he was when the chips were really down. Then Ken Rosewell came out against Vic Seixas. Rosewell always seemed to have an edge on Vic. He was expected to win. He won the first set, but then Seixas won the second. Again, it was very tense. Vic Seixas and Tony Trabert regained the Davis Cup for the United States in 1954. But Hode and Rosewell won it back for Australia at Forest Hills in '55, with Neil Fraser in the squad and Rex Hartwig playing in the doubles.
When they came back from the 1955 trip, rumours were rife that they were going to turn professional.
Certainly was a wonderful trip, and all the boys really played well, you know, before the Davis Cup match and after, and we're all looking forward to defending it again next year.
Ken, can you give us any indication when you are likely to make the decision?
As far as I know, Brian, Jack wants to know by the 17th of October, which is Monday, I think.
Jack Kramer did want to know. He thought he had a contract with them.
I'd like to see Ken and Lou. Also, I'd like to clear up the situation regarding whether or not professional tennis would be accepted in the event that I'd like to bring my tour featuring Tony Traber to Australia. I've heard lots of rumors, pro and con, about how the public and how the officials feel about professional tennis, and I'd like to take a on-the-spot visit just to find out for myself so there will be no misunderstandings.
They didn't turn pro, not for the moment anyway. Quite apart from winning the Davis Cup in 53, 55 and 56, they won most of the major singles titles around the world. Although Hode didn't win the United States singles because Rosewell beat him there in 1956 to stop him winning the Grand Slam. And unfortunately, Ken Rosewell did not win Wimbledon. Hode beat him there in 1956. Ken Rosewell joined Kramer's troupe in 57. Lou Hode stayed on and won Wimbledon again that year. Then he too joined the professional ranks.
When Hode and Rosewell turned professional at a very young age, they had to face up to a man who was a really great tennis player of that time. That was Pancho Gonzalez. Gonzalez was a much better player when he turned professional than he was during his amateur days. In fact, he was one of the hardest and the toughest competitors that ever played tennis. He had a hatred about losing. One sensed it on the court. He was a great competitor, and I sincerely believe he was the fastest big man I ever saw in my life.
Gonzalez had defeated Frank Sedgman on tour after Frank had turned professional. And he beat Ken Rosewell too when he turned. When Hode turned, he and Gonzalez toured Australia and the United States, and they played some of the greatest singles ever. Hode led early, but later in the tour, Gonzalez won the head-to-head series. So although Pancho Gonzalez had a short amateur career, he certainly will go down as one of the tennis greats. During this period, it was a strange period in big tennis, simply because the best tennis players were professionals, and yet a lot of other players were winning the major events. And there was a great deal of tension at that time between administrators and the professionals led by Jack Kramer. At the time, I was writing a lot of stuff for the Sydney Morning Herald, and I advocated that there should be open tennis. I could see, really, that the course was for open tennis. I was a strong supporter of professional tennis because, let's face it and let's be honest, all the players of that period were earning money under the lap, and all the officials in every country knew this. So the game at that stage was complete hypocrisy. And yet, you know, when I reflect back on the articles I wrote, I received some very strange letters from the senior administrators of the game telling me that I was not doing the right thing by advocating open tennis. So let's face it, it was a very strange time in the game. But Australian tennis was very fortunate because even though the best players kept joining the professional ranks, equally brilliant players kept coming along to take their place. Margaret Court and Rod Laver both won their first Australian championships in 1960. Margaret Court's record speaks for itself. She was certainly the finest woman tennis player Australia has ever produced. She defeated Billie Jean King to win her first Wimbledon in 1963 and went on to win all the major championships a number of times, including a Grand Slam in 1970. I was also very fortunate to be involved with Rod Laver in his early days. He was brought to the attention of Dunlop in Queensland. Laver had great ground strokes and he was equally good at the net and overhead. He was one of the few great left-handers to come over the ball on his backhand. Laver's strength was in his wonderful swinging service, plus his ability to move to net behind almost any shot to finish off a point. Like Lou Hode, he was a completely natural player, capable of the most superb instinctive shots. He defeated Neil Fraser to win his first Australian championship. And at Forest Hills in 1962, he beat Roy Emerson to win his first Grand Slam. In 1968, Laver beat Tony Roach to win the first Open Wimbledon, and he went on to win a second Grand Slam in 1969. In 1974, Rod Laver became the first player to win $1 million in prize money in his career. And in 1979, John Bull and John McEnroe each won $1 million in 1 year.